President Trump's 2019 executive orders in response to the COVID-19 fake pandemic consolidated all of these supposed oversight agencies under the Department of Health and Human Services. And in that act, the CDC was given untold power to literally take your life. Don't believe me? Come along with me. This is the Dr.Jane Ruby Show, and you're about to enter some pretty hard truth in medicine. Welcome to the Dr. Jane Ruby Show on this Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. Well, when destruction comes to your door, when you really realize that your country and your lives are in immediate danger, the government won't be scrambling to put laws in place or policies like they appeared to do in 2020 for the fake COVID pandemic. Oh no, I'm telling you this because those laws, mandates, and policies are already snugly in place. In an exclusive breaking story, you're going to learn from some former passengers who were quarantined on the Grand Princess cruise ship in March of 2020 what powers the government has, including and specifically the empowered CDC, to take total control over your life if they merely have a, quote, reasonable assumption or belief that you could be contagious for anything they declare. Contagious? You are all a heartbeat away from being pulled out of your home and taken to a military-style detention center on the mere suspicion that you might spread a cold or flu. And of all the experts reviewing recently FOIA'd materials and testimonies from those passengers and so much more is my colleague, Sasha Latypova, who always brings incredible receipts. And Sasha joins me now. Sasha, thanks so much for coming back on the show. This is what sounds like an incredible story.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Jane. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, so I just recently obtained these FOIA documents. So colleagues from Children's Health Defense helped filing this FOIA. And the responses so far are not complete. So they're holding some materials back, which we're going to try to obtain. But even what they've produced is like insane and scary. And I wanted people to understand what is potentially CDC can do and how to, and have prepared mental strategies of dealing with this.
Yeah. I mean, you're about to lay out some pretty incredible damning information on the CDC's powers. People oftentimes maybe misperceive that they're like sort of a recommendation agency. Hey, be careful, take your shots, do this, do that. But this is a story that blows that out of the water, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So the CDC's ostensible congressional mandate is to just collect and analyze data. That's what they were set up, and that was their congressional mandate. And now turns out that's not what it is. They actually are above law. So they're above Constitution. They can violate your constitutional right to due process, and they can detain you merely by labeling you on nothing, no actual evidence they have to produce. Their magical power resides in their ability to declare you, quote unquote, in pre-communicable stage of a communicable illness.
Any illness they choose, right?
Any illness that they choose with a PCR test that never is validated for anything, and they themselves control. So they're complete kind of closed box. They decide what to declare a pandemic on. They decide that you are somehow in a pre-communicable stage, meaning they don't have to prove you have any disease. You're just potentially going to have it,
Yeah.
And based on that and a bunch of authority given to them by Congress, they can take you into a military facility, hold you there indefinitely, kill you there, and label you disease X.
Right.
And this is exactly
that you died from the disease X, whatever they choose it to be. But I want to take a couple of steps back. You said that Children's Health Defense originally requested FOIA materials. Was this information that came out of it a surprise when you and they looked at some of this first paperwork that just came to your attention through the FOIA?
Right. So the reason I asked them to collaborate on this is because I saw already a court filing. So this wasn't popularized at all, and I came across this court case, which was filed, I believe, back in 2022, where 15 attorneys general of states filed a complaint against HHS and CDC, telling them that their definitions of a pandemic are based on WHO definitions, and asking them to revise that because, obviously we shouldn't just follow WHO. It's an unelected, non-democratic, some kind of bureaucracy in Geneva. And so, but the response of HHS was, they said, oh, well, our definitions are not defined by WHO. And then in the description of the definitions, of course, it's all based on WHO. So they basically, HHS fought back. The judge sided with HHS. Then Texas and Oklahoma AGs refiled again and lost that case, or judge dismissed it, and they did not appeal. So they just let it expire. And so, but in those court exchanges, especially in the response of the HHS, what I read shocked me. So this is where I found out this whole thing about Grand Princess and Diamond Princess cruises. They referred to that in the court proceedings, and they said, oh, because we already have this power to, and they described it, in 2020, we took off 3,200 people from these two cruise ships. One was international arrival, one was domestic, Grand Princess. And we took them to the military bases and we held them there in quarantine. And these are our authorities to do so.
Nobody talked about that. Nobody knew that. We knew that cruise ships were being sequestered. People couldn't get on or off. But these two ships were taken to a military compound.
Yeah, so so that's when I decided, I asked a CHD colleague who I previously worked with successfully to file a FOIA based on this explanation in the court case. And I said, well, can we get those paperwork for those 3,200 people? And especially I was interested in the Grand Princess because that was a domestic. So when crossing an international border, CDC sort of, claims the jurisdiction because it's an international border crossing. But here the Grand Princess was already in California, off coast of California. And nevertheless, CDC asserted their authority in California and took approximately, I think they took 2,000 people from this ship. And we said, well, can we get that paperwork, that quarantine paperwork that they issued at that time? And so we partially received some materials. And yes, so they're saying we took these people to several Air Force bases, specifically Travis Air Force Base in Fairfield, California, Dobbins in Marietta, Georgia, Lackland in San Antonio, Texas, and Miramar in San Diego. So these people were taken off the ships, given these orders. They're called quarantine order.
Right. And we've got copies.
Were told a bunch of lies about you are pre-symptomatic, asymptomatic for this deadly pandemic virus, and you must go with us to this military facility. And then a bunch of these people, looks like by this partial paperwork, were reissued orders to either remain in the military facility, or they were released to another places, maybe hotels, I'm not sure, and because they're redacted, or allowed to go home and remain in quarantine. And it's basically like a parole, so you have to, you can't move, so that's just shocking. It's just shocking because also there is no warrant for arrest. There is no probable cause for anything. It's just an opinion of a bureaucrat from CDC. And the appeal process is, you can appeal to CDC, to the same person who put you there.
Right.
You appeal to reassess your medical condition.
Okay, a couple of questions. is that order from March of 2020 that they imposed on those passengers, is that still in force on the books? I mean, to be able to implement anytime they choose, or was it a one-time order during that period?
Oh, no, it's not one time. This is part of US law. So they can
Now,
do it at any time.
okay.
At any time when they declare, so they're referring here, let me see. So they're referring to several things. They're referring to WHO again. Yeah, so here's their procedure, where they're saying, based on attached medical declaration, I find, and this is one person in first person, I order, I find. It's as if they're.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you were nice enough to provide a copy. If you of this document, this PDF, I could probably, if you're on a particular page of it and you want to reference it, I'll make sure.
Oh yes.
As we go, we'll put it up on the screen.
It didn't print with pages. Sorry. So this was. Of course, they don't have pages on the.
They don't want to make it easy for us.
Pages in PDF, but that doesn't come out. So this is like U.S. Department order under Section 361 of the Public Health Service Act, 42 U.S.C. 264, Code of Federal Regulations, and it's interstate quarantine order. And this is where you said there's Section D. So this is Section B findings. In Section B findings, they list their authority and the process by which they come up with this order. And that resides on several things. So they're saying, I find, and by I, they mean specific person who issues this order, which is, in this case, was someone named Lisa Rotz, R-O-T-Z.
Right, MD.
MD, and she is Deputy Director, Division of Global Migration and Quarantine Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And
Sasha, notice something. What does that mean to you? Director of Global Migration and Quarantine Centers for the Disease Centers for, and Quarantine for the Centers for Disease Control. So global migration. So I thought the CDC was a U.S. What is it?
Right. So it's a U.S. agency that is supposed to collect data only and disseminate data only.
Thank you for repeating that for the people so they understand that. But what changed their power?
I'm shocked, and that's why I'm getting to this.
Okay.
We're trying to understand at what point, how did their authority to just collect data and disseminate data all of a sudden evolved into ability to subvert U.S. Constitution and imprison anyone without due cause at any time indefinitely and kill them there.
Okay, well, this is United States Code 42. Like you said, it's law. How did it get into U.S. Code 42?
Well, I'm going to also ask my colleague Catherine Watt to look. I think she looked into it, and she has an extensive history of changes of U.S. law over time, where these things got in on the books, and we'll figure out at what point this became their authority. But they're clearly exercising it and clearly telling the U.S. states, which are essentially sovereign entities, that they can do it in any of their jurisdictions. And here they've practiced it in March 2020 in California.
Wow.
So their first is that they collected some evidence.
Yeah.
So she says, based on scientific evidence collected on the outbreak of 2019 novel coronavirus, establishes the disease meets the definition of severe acute respiratory syndromes specified under, and here we have executive orders that they're referring to. And
do they name it? I'm sorry, because I'm not right on that page yet.
They're numbering them. So it's 13295.
13295. That's executive order by Donald Trump, 13295. Thank you.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes. And then a few others, 13375 and 13674. So a few of these are, this is under Trump administration, obviously, all of this is happening. And so they're referring to these executive orders, which are, executive orders are only applying to federal employees. So I don't understand why, like, the executive orders cannot apply to a state. or private workers or citizens. The executive order is issued by executive branch and technically can only apply to federal employees. But anyway, then the second one is that the Director General of World Health Organization has declared that outbreak, this is a pandemic, So, and this is, again, we're talking, they're issuing this in early March, March 8th or so. There are maybe 11 cases of
I see.
COVID
Yep.
and no deaths. Maybe somebody reported a death in China. So why are we here in California? These people are not, by the way, coming from China. They just started from California and were turned back and they're right back in California.
Let me interject something because, you try to tie pieces together. And I want to tie these two things together. First, let me lay out that you fairly recently had let's just call it politely, a disagreement with the self-proclaimed inventor Robert Malone of the mRNA poison on the issue of the definition of pandemic when he was on Dr. Malik's show. But here's where it, kind of gets interesting. You said, rightfully so, you just questioned, well, what did they base this on? One person in China? But part of Malone's narrative is, and he was kind of called out by an investigative reporter, I'll leave his name out for now, for saying that there were many, many deaths that Malone, he was saying, was aware of, and that his friend, whatever, the doc Callahan over in Wuhan, they were dealing with many, many Chinese deaths from this, virus, which is why it seems like he would be incentivized, right? Because it would, if you put the links together, it looks like that he and anybody else pushing that story, that there were many hundreds or thousands of deaths in Wuhan from this thing, that justified the U.S., what you're disclosing now, and that you and Catherine are going to start to dig into. How did this become law? Because they had to base it on something. But if there was one or two people that they claimed with a fake PCR, it's in conflict to what Malone was saying was really, there were hundreds. We were dealing with hundreds of Chinese deaths. And this reporter rightfully asked him, well, where's the proof of those deaths? I get it. Where's the documentation for the fact that the Chinese were dealing with all the big number of deaths that then justified the U.S.? I don't want to overdo it. You can explain it better than me, but am I connecting good dots?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So first of all, that claim of we were dealing with X number, hundreds or large number of deaths in China, frankly, that has no relationship to doing this, to detaining people who traveled from California to California. Right. And there wasn't a lot of deaths. So and you're correct. We still have no real evidence that there were any deaths in China at that time. This is early March. If there were any deaths, first of all, they all started appearing somehow after Michael Callahan arrived there. Before that, there wasn't. So big questions of what exactly Michael Callahan was doing there. But let's put that aside. So there were, as far as I remember, by early March, by this March 8th, in the US, there was something like 11 cases, PCR cases. There were no deaths. So in the US, announcing a pandemic, announcing extraordinary public health emergency, announcing, as we later learned, that US government decided on February 4th that this virus is national security threat. This is like a month before. US government decided it was national security threat. We were not told. We were told it's some sort of BS story about, pangolin and bat in China. And some people still insist on it. So, all of these lies, and then him claiming that this was somehow justified, that somehow we were supposed to all go into lockdown and pandemic announcements because of some PCR tests and something that may have happened in China, but we don't quite know.
And this unfounded hundreds of people, dying, and we had to declare it because interesting how you start to see who is behind which stories. Just want everybody to hold that.
like especially him, that's my disagreement with him. There's nothing else. I'm not hating him. I'm not, some kind of like stalker after him. He clearly on Twitter stated that, the government has this right to announce pandemics based on no criteria, based on PCR test. And I completely disagree. I vehemently disagree with this because that's BS. PCR is not validated. It's not diagnostic. It's subject to manipulation. For months, and this becomes relevant here, for months, CDC, remember, did not allow anyone to set up an independent PCR testing lab. All the swabs had to be shipped to CDC. So CDC here says, I have a genome, I have a test, but I'm going to keep it secret, even though the genome ostensibly is published in GenBank, so any independent lab can go and set up a test. But somehow we can't. Somehow we have to send it to CDC to tell us that we have a pandemic. So that does not survive any scrutiny. And again, government cannot announce pandemic prospectively based on some sort of a cooked up genome in a GenBank. That's exactly what they did. So somebody uploaded a genome. I contend now with a lot of research that genome is only a computer model. There is no real substance. It's just a computer model. So somebody uploads genome in a GenBank, and US and everywhere else announces a global pandemic. That's BS, not public health. That's military attack. Okay. So but also remember that historically, epidemics, like we never had pandemics, but epidemics were announced retrospectively. So after the time has passed and you've collected the data as CDC is supposed to collect the data and disseminated the data and calculated, we had so many cases, we had so many deaths, we compare it to previous years, it exceeded it by, I forget, there was actually a percentage by which it was supposed to exceed the previous average seasons. And then they could say, oh, because it's, let's say, 10% higher, then we can say it was a pandemic afterwards. Not prospectively looking at some computer model from China and saying, oh my God, now everyone locked down.
Yeah, because they want to normalize the the early declaration, a pandemic's coming. Like you've really laid out several smoking guns.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had more to say on that, but you just laid out like 3 or 4 smoking guns when you said before, this is a military operation. Why is it that the American people are not seeing this? And I mean, even though it's not in mainstream media, there are enough pieces that have trickled into mainstream from what we've all done, like your work and all your interviews and stuff like that, and Catherine's and many others. Why? What is it? Just a disbelief? I don't know. What do you?
I think some of it is people don't want to think that it's very hard to come to this. Even when they do logically come to this conclusion, it's hard to come emotionally to this conclusion. So they try to protect their own psyche from this very hard news. Okay.
Do you know what my saving secret is? Well, I discovered how gold acts as a hedge during unprecedented economic times. I also learned how important it is to diversify my retirement savings, and there's a great way to do it. But you need the education to be a smart consumer of physical gold and silver. When you contact my partners at Augusta Precious Metals, the first thing they will do is set you up with a free personal webinar. Do you know what a spread is and how it can save you or cost you a lot of money in the long run? I didn't, but I surely understood the gold and silver investment process as well as the spread at the end of my 30-minute webinar. You won't even talk to a sales professional until you've met with a qualified education trainer to help you understand how gold and silver transactions work. Augusta Precious Metals has a 10-step buying system, and your brief 30-minute webinar will prepare you to decide, first of all, if gold and silver is right for you. What's the right amount or portion of your retirement savings that you should put into the metals? And they have a great aftercare department, so expect a long-term relationship. Call Augusta today at 888 836-1890 or click on the link below to schedule your free webinar today.
Now, what I advise everyone is, find your internal moral resources to accept the truth. And after that, you will see that the picture becomes much clearer. You can make better decisions for yourself and your family. There's only positive.
Thank you for joining the show tonight. To see the conclusion of the interview with Sasha Latypova and the further discussion about the CDC's unprecedented power over our lives and our movement, as well as our overall liberties and life, please join me again on Friday night for part 2 of Sasha Latypova and the runaway CDC. Good night, everyone.